Can everyone hear me? In the room, online? Great. Hi everyone, I'm Samantha Bingham. I'm the Clean Transportation Program Director for the Chicago Department of Transportation. So what that means is I get to work on direct emissions reduction policies, programs, and projects for the city. Thank you all for joining us today for this event, both in the room and online. I'm going to kick off our EV and infrastructure framework discussion. Great. So electric vehicles are an important, they're an important vehicle technology when it comes to sustainability. Electric vehicles have fewer emissions and a host of other benefits that other speakers will be going into later. But from a sustainability standpoint, EVs can help mitigate some of our pressing issues here in the city. The transportation sector is the second largest contributor to the greenhouse gas emissions here in Chicago, and a major contributor to our region's poor air quality issues. And while electric vehicles typically, or commonly, you hear them referred to in energy policy or climate policy, they tend to sound like the one solution in terms of transportation options to solve our climate and air quality issues. They are one of many mobility options and strategies that CDOT promotes and encourages to help us meet these important goals. So when we're talking about electric vehicles and the framing of this task, this meeting tonight and the framework, we're talking about battery electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid vehicles. We are not talking about traditional conventional hybrid vehicles. We're talking about vehicles that are highway speed that need a plug to recharge their batteries. And that's commonly referred to as battery electric vehicles. These vehicles are 100% electric. They need to plug in to charge their batteries. They typically have an all-electric range of 80 to 400 miles for current electric vehicles in the marketplace. Plug-in hybrid electric vehicles, or PHEVs, they have a more limited range where they run on all electricity, but then they have a gas engine. They have a gasoline tank, they have a gas engine with an electric motor, and their electric range is more limited, 20 to 40 miles of range. So just to set the groundwork, here that we're talking about these types of electric vehicles in the framework plan. And we're talking about electric vehicle charging infrastructure along with this plan. Here in the United States, electric vehicles need to plug into charging infrastructure to recharge those batteries. And how electric vehicle charging infrastructure is categorized is based on how quickly the batteries are recharged. So there's level 1, there's level 2, and there's DC fast charging. Level 1 that you see behind me on the lower right-hand corner of the slide is the lowest power of electric recharging that is available in the United States. It could be as simple as an outlet in your home or your garage. You typically only find this option of charging at homes. And from a cost standpoint, here, if you're a ComEd customer here in the Chicago area, you're paying about 11 cents per kilowatt hour, which is roughly the equivalent of about $1.20 per gallon of gasoline. So definitely a fuel saving option. Moving up in those charging options on the right of the slide, we find level 2. And level 2 charging is typically found in homes or at workplaces or public charging stations. And this, level 2 charging adds about 10 to 40 miles of range per hour that the vehicle is plugged in. With level 1, it's recharging your vehicle about 3 to 5 miles per hour that your vehicle is plugged in. And then with level 2 charging, as I said, more common workplaces, not as common as level 1, and then outside of the home. And that typically in the Chicago area, public chargers, you can find free ones, where they typically charge about 20 to 30 cents per kilowatt hour. And lastly, we have DC fast charging. So DC fast chargers are designed to recharge an electric vehicle's battery up to 80% within 20 minutes to 50 minutes to an hour, depending on the size of that battery pack in the vehicle and how depleted the vehicle's battery is. So these are much more expensive installations, and typically there's a premium to use these stations. Typically in the Chicago area, it's about 40 to 60 cents per kilowatt hour. And the charging pyramid that you see on the left-hand side of the slide, this is indicative of where we see demand for charging. So according, this pyramid was developed by Argonne National Lab, and in their studies, currently 80% of charging is taking place at home of electric vehicles. But as more EVs are being adopted, and specifically in Chicago, where we have a high density of multi-unit dwellings, there needs to be more solutions to provide safe, accessible, reliable charging infrastructure at workplaces, in the public, to be able to recharge those vehicles. And as you move up that charging pyramid, the cost of those charging infrastructure, both the equipment and the installations, increases in cost, where those intercity, DC fast charging type of stations can range from at least $500,000 in cost. And home charging can be almost free, with just requiring a charging connector to charge into your 110 outlet. So in 2020 and 2021, CDOT worked with some researchers at Northwestern University to better understand the landscape of EVs and EV charging infrastructure in the city. And on the map on the left with the orange gradient, you'll find the EV charging density by community area in the city in 2020. And what we found was that electric vehicles are found and they're registered in every single one of Chicago's community areas. Not surprising, because electric vehicles are a fantastic mobility option, a vehicle choice for the range that Chicagoans typically drive in a day. We have relatively low cost electricity comparative to gasoline, and the shorter range of early electric vehicles and the cost of the secondary market for electric vehicles for some time made them really attractive, and they're still attractive today. On the right, on the map with the gray to purple gradients, is the public charging, the number of public chargers per community area. And when I refer to public charging, I mean charging for electric vehicles that's accessible to anyone. It's not owned by the city, it's not a public asset. These are primarily private investments, and typically located at pharmacies, parking garages downtown, and areas where people are going to be parking for some time, doing something else while their vehicle charges. And so, in addition to discovering that EVs were ubiquitous across the city, charging infrastructure access was not. Over 40 community areas in Chicago had no access to public charging. So further relying on the private investment to supply charging access is just going to continue to drive inequity in the access of not only electric vehicles, but the benefits of electric vehicles and having fewer emissions of this mobility option. Can't see what I'm doing. Oh, great. So at CDOT, understanding that if the city doesn't play a role in, the city and others don't play a role in solving for this market failure, this inequity will continue to increase and increase as electric vehicles become more and more affordable and on cost parity with gasoline-powered vehicles, which they are projected to do in about less than a decade. So, looking at how to frame the city's role in our investments in the future, CDOT is working on an electric vehicle and infrastructure framework. So this framework is relying and being guided by existing plans, by this research done by Northwestern, by our We Will plan for economic development in the city, by CDOT's strategic plan, by the climate action plan. All of these plans touch on the need for reduced cost and mobility options, cleaner mobility options, giving Chicago residents more choice to get to jobs and within their communities, and options that are lower emitting and have a lower cost. So, being able to draw on those existing plans, but then also centering the framework on CDOT's principles and centering it on equity first and foremost, to deliver a plan that is representative of Chicagoans and by Chicagoans. And so, with the framework, the scope that we're kicking off here tonight is an important step, and that's the public engagement. This is an initial round of public input and engagement. We really want this framework, the guide, the recommendations with the framework to be have been developed with the input of all Chicago communities. And so as part of that, we're kicking off this public engagement, and then the framework will be publicly accessible at the end of once the plan is released, and will further help CDOT and the city guide us in future public engagement as we develop EV infrastructure projects in the city. And one more point I wanted to make was that the scope will also be of the framework will be developing a public right-of-way or what we call curbside charging pilot for the city. We want to better understand how that model can be both sustainable and safe and replicable across the city. But then also, we're looking at ways that the city can be more transparent and efficient in our regulatory processes that will, more broadly, help to reduce costs for charging infrastructure developments across the city. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn things over to Jane. I appreciate the further discussion and any questions you have.
Thanks, Sam. So I'm just going to talk through a little bit more broader context about the benefits of EVs and kind of what we're seeing on a national level with electric vehicles and EV infrastructure. So Sam actually went through a lot of these different kind of charger types already, so I'm just going to kind of speed through these. These above, the top two are examples of DC fast chargers, and the bottom two are level 2 chargers that Sam kind of discussed already. And she also kind of went through the pricing of these. So just looking at more on a national context level, we are seeing significant investment in electric vehicles from major automakers, major ones in the US, specifically GM, Ford, Tesla, and many others. And they're investing $30 to $50 billion in EV production. And when we look at that dotted red line, which is the US, we are very much on par with the rest of the world in terms of EV investment in manufacturing. And that investment is going to really have a trickle-down effect in terms of the share of EVs purchased. Since 2020, there's been rapid growth just within EV, the share of EVs within all vehicles purchased, and that's going to projected to increase exponentially. Where there's predictions of 20-30% adoption starting in 2030, as you can see in this chart. And there's also major investment in in just looking at batteries and making sure that that investment is going to essentially decrease the cost of batteries, which is currently the highest cost associated with EVs. And ultimately that would bring down the cost of the overall purchase of an electric vehicle. Battery prices are predicted to continue to fall within a 100 per kilowatt hour, being the Department of Energy's price at which EVs will be about the same price or better than ICE vehicles or gasoline vehicles. And this is being supported at the federal level. Nationally, a lot of funding is going into battery production sites and manufacturing sites, with the U.S. opening battery manufacturing plants really across the country. So you can see here. And then, so what does this look like in Illinois? We have similarly seen that federal funding and support has trickled down into our state because we are ramping up productions of electric vehicles and electric vehicle infrastructure. Our Governor Pritzker has set a goal of having 1 million EVs on the road by 2030, and IDOT is investing about $150 million in fast chargers statewide throughout U.S. throughout the highway system. And as Sam mentioned, CDOT has also had several goals around electric vehicles and lowering and creating more sustainable modes through the Climate Action Plan. And Illinois has also seen private EV investment. There's 11 facilities with $5 billion in investment. There's over 10,000 jobs that have been announced already, and 18% of facilities are in disadvantaged communities. So we're really bringing a lot of meaningful jobs to all communities in the city. And then just looking at more locally, even still, EV adoption in Cook County has also continued to really grow month over month since 2017, particularly within the last 6 months, as you can see. And this, this is for EVs and hybrids. And then, environmentally, there is significant savings for EVs as well. Today, it would take your gas-powered car would need to get around 60 miles to the gallon to be as clean as an EV. And in terms of cost savings, we wanted to highlight this Consumer Reports study that found that owners will save about $6,000 to $12,000 over the life of the vehicle. And that's essentially just spending 60% less to power and repair that vehicle. And then kind of circling back to the jobs, beyond manufacturing, there are a lot of well-paying and high-volume jobs within, mechanics and electricians. And this is kind of highlighting, what the salary would be annually for mechanics, and just kind of the volume of how many that we're kind of hoping to get by 2030, which is about 20,000. And this slide is highlighting mechanics, which is about 100K annually in Chicago, and again, a very high volume of jobs and mechanics. So these are really exciting opportunities in our city and nationally as well. And that's kind of it for my part, and I'm going to turn it over to David Redd with some exciting interactive activities.
Thank you, Jenny. Good evening, everybody. This is the part where we start to get you all involved in the fun, so be ready. And also, I think we've got some things taking place online for those who are here with us virtually. So again, thank you for taking time to join us this evening. And what we really want to do at this point is build from the background that you just heard and saw on the slides, and the explanations that you were given to start to define the electric vehicle and mobility infrastructure framework that we're talking about tonight. A major goal of this process is to learn and develop a framework plan with the community's input, because we want to make sure that that framework equitably advances e-mobility and EV improvements for all Chicago residents. You'll see maps, the charging stations that we currently have, and you'll see that we have some huge opportunity to make sure that things are done in an equitable fashion. During this interactive session, we're going to encourage you, everybody in the room and online, to consider improvements and barriers that you have experienced through EVs and e-mobility. So everybody here is on the frame of mind to talk about EVs tonight, so we'll talk about some opportunities and some barriers. So let's open it up with some statements, some fun statements that I will ask you to raise your hand if you think this is a truth or a myth. All right, first, the increase in electric vehicles entering the market will eventually collapse the power grid. Raise your hand if you think that is a truth. I see no hands going up. Raise your hand if you think it's a myth. I see everybody's hand going up. Thank you. That is, in fact, a myth. All right, next question. Oops, did I go too far? There we go. Electric vehicles are not safe compared to gas-powered vehicles. Is that a myth that they are not safe compared to gas-powered vehicles? Or is that the truth? Is that a myth? Yes, myth. Ding, 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 ding. All right, we got a myth. All right, great. All right, so thank you for your input. The purpose of this activity is really just to scratch the surface and help us understand your familiarity with the EV and e-mobility infrastructure. And I think as an icebreaker on the way into the room tonight, you may have put some little sponge balls into mason jars to sort of start to get a familiarity with what you know about EVs, and we'll maybe referencing that a little bit later. So at this point, I'm going to ask my colleagues who know their assignments for the stations that are here on the stage with us to come on down so that we can start that process. We have designated staff at each station that will be making their way onto the stage, right? And in these activities, you're going to provide everybody in the room, so you're going to be invited down too. You'll have to get up out of your seats and come on down and have some fun with us. You're going to provide input on how to improve electric vehicle and e-mobility access and your perceived barriers of electric modes of transportation and your mobility needs. So each station will have a designated activity, and materials are already provided for you. So we want you to feel free, come on down. You can start to come down. Come onto the stage. Feel free to ask the facilitators any questions during this time, and we do plan to come back together to discuss the next steps and provide an opportunity for people to ask direct questions to the facilitators. I think I hear Andrew giving directions to folks online right now regarding Menti. So we're going to take about 8 minutes to go through this, 8 to 10 minutes. Everybody, thank you so much for participating and asking some good questions here in the room. I haven't seen the chat, but I hope that everything is going well there and we're getting some good questions answered. So as you see on the slide behind me, we are talking about next steps. The first thing I would mention is that we're hosting a total of 3 meetings like this. This was the first one, sort of our kickoff tonight. We'll have an opportunity for larger community feedback through a survey, so you should all see, for those who are with us, a survey that was on the index cards and on the one-sheeter to refer you to the survey, and I believe we probably got some information that's also on display for those who are virtually with us. So please take the survey. Meanwhile, we're also working on drafting policy interventions and preparing an infrastructure installation process map, so that's the next step. And then in the spring, we'll be focused on second, gaining additional feedback and more specific input through more meetings. So we're going to make sure that we carry this out in an equitable way with meetings in the city. The first phase of the project will culminate with the summary report of EV knowledge, attitudes, and beliefs. So that's the key part of the first phase. The next public meeting will be Thursday, November the 16th, and that's virtually, it's all virtual. That'll take place from 6 to 7:30, same time as this evening's. Again, all virtual. Thursday, November the 16th. Again, we want to thank you for taking time tonight, particularly for those who made time in their calendar to come here in person, and also to those who are online. We want to make sure we leave a few minutes for questions. I think we had some good discussion here in the room, but if there are any other questions that people would like to submit in front of the group, we can do that now. And I think for those who are in the teleconference, if you want to drop anything in the chat, we can get to those in the remaining time left. So any questions? Yes, ma'am.
I don't have a question per se, but I do have a recommendation. I noticed around the senior living quarters, you see a lot of elders using bikes more than I have ever seen. And they're usually riding the Dizzy bike, so it's really wonderful to see that. I think that for certain seniors though, that may have mobility barriers or problems. Maybe if you look into a three-wheeler for a senior, something that could be made specifically for seniors to get out more, that will enhance the usage of them having an activity to get out and go to the park and get out a little bit more. Because I see people in wheelchairs actually just going around their own little area because you have the actual bike line, the bike line or transportation barrier on the street already mapped out for them. So it's almost like a safe haven for them. So I think that if we also include them so that they can have things to do and get out more and feel more safe doing it in their own little area, I think that that would be a great thought to keep in mind.
Thank you. So for those who couldn't hear, we have an advocate for making sure there's even more accessibility for seniors to be able to move around and take advantage of bikes as they're already doing, but also EV opportunities. So thank you very much for that comment. Any other questions or comments here in the room? Anything on the chat that we should know about, Alan? Are we good? Okay, we're good. Okay, well again, thank you for coming out and look forward to more public meetings about this. Please spread the word and take the survey. And thank you, Sam. Thank you, Jane. I think that'll close us out for the night. Have a good night, everybody.